Welcome to tonight's webinar, Dissecting the Food Web and Owl Pellet Investigation. My name is Lindsay Glassner. I am the Outreach Coordinator here at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology with our K-12 group. I am joined tonight by Kelly Schaefer, our Education Specialist, also with the K-12 Education team. And as you can guess from the images and titles, we're talking about owl pellets. This webinar was inspired by a kit we most recently developed with the same exact title as this webinar. We recognize that many educators dissect owl pellets depending on the age group, whether it's elementary or even through high school. But why not learn and discover owls and the wonder of owl pellets from the bird experts, the Lab of Ornithology. So our Owl Pellet curriculum helped inspire this webinar. You do not need to own the curriculum to participate in this webinar by any means. We plan on using this to discuss some of the benefits of dissecting owl pellets, the educational benefits, as well as just hopefully share some fun facts for you guys about how awesome owls are. And we're a little biased being bird brains, but owls are awesome. Here we go. So for those of you who haven't joined us on our webinars before, we use the platform Zoom, and it's very straightforward, but we also like to have our webinars be interactive. Much of what we say, we really like to hear from you and get your feedback on topics that we discuss, recommendations on how to adapt activities, anything of that sort. So we have a chat window. You'll notice down in the bottom you have a nice little quotation bubble, chat bubble, and on the right-hand side, when you open that chat window up to the text box, it can often say to all panelists. We want to make sure that you change that so it says to all panelists and attendees. That way, any contributing comments you make will actually be seen by your peers. Again, we want to encourage you guys to share any thoughts, facts, resources that you're aware of to help others benefit and learn. So let's test out that chat window. Let us know who you are, where you're from, and whether you have dissected owl pellets with students. And I'll throw that in there too of what age group you also work with. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I recognize some familiar names. Devlin, welcome back. You always make our webinars international from Canada. We're gonna raise this up, Kelly. Thank you. Hillary, nice to see your name again. So looking through, we have a lot of elementary people, which is really good. We'll focus on some of that. Some informal and formal educators. Some people have not used owl pellets before. That is perfectly fine. Hopefully we'll inspire you to use owl pellets to give you some great starter activities. For those who have, we'll hopefully introduce some fun new activities as well for you. Dissect owl pellets, summer camp kids. And it's California. Excellent. A lot of familiar names. This is wonderful. Welcome everyone to tonight's webinar. We're really happy to have you guys here. Like I said, Kelly is going to be monitoring the chat window. So if at any point in time during the webinar you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat window. Kelly will be monitoring them. If we miss your question or anything like that, you can always use the Q&A box too, but it's sometimes easier for us just to monitor the chat window. And then at the very end, we'll also have a specific question time too, where we'll answer anything as well. So we are the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. We're based in Ithaca, New York, and it does not look like that right now. It's covered in snow and ice, and it's dark, which you would imagine at 8 p.m. in Eastern New York. But at the Lab of Ornithology, we are a membership-driven institution. We are a nonprofit, and our mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science focused on birds. Now, specifically, Kelly and I are with the K-12 education program, and we develop resources that build science skills while inspiring young people to connect to local habitats, explore biodiversity, and again, engage in citizen science projects. Specifically, one of those resources that we have developed is the Owl Pellet Kit. So in this webinar, we're going to structure some of the content around how we have structured the kit itself, and that includes discussing food chains versus food webs and different scenarios and how dissecting owl pellets can help us learn more about the food that they are eating, and then the interactions that they have within an ecosystem. But we'll also talk about how we can bring in some more of the next generation science standards and the Common Core State standards with the dissection of owl pellets, bringing in some structure and function, talking about based on the information they've learned, how they can apply that to other species of owls or other scenarios as well. So a lot to cover. And before we get started, I just love this video. We recently had the opportunity to have a group of elementary kids join us at the Cornell Lab to test out our Owl Pellet Kits, and we were able to document their experience. So for those who have dissected owl pellets before, this may be familiar. For those who haven't, you'll be able to see the joy of it.
What I like to do is I like to put all the fur in one side. We have one dot.
Wait, I think I really just found a job.
Wow, really?
I'm getting so many sweet.
Most likely a bowl or a thomas.
It's a leg bone, and I think it's kind of snapped off at the end.
I'm thinking this is a rat skull.
I think I found a tooth. I don't know, but it's really thick.
So Kelly informed me that the video is skipping a little bit for her. So just in case, if you want to go back and see that again, she shared the link of the video through our YouTube channel in the chat window as well. So again, like I mentioned, we are going to structure this webinar based on the structure of the Owl Pellet Kit that we have. And that's 3 lessons. The first one is focusing on the food web, using the barn owl, which is our focal species for the kit, and the species that provides our owl pellets. We represent the barn owl as a tertiary consumer, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and what food sources it does, and discuss even some trophic levels and how that might impact an owl with disruptions in trophic levels. We'll talk about that in lesson, or the first activities. The next lesson is all about actually dissecting the owl pellet, using dichotomous keys, identifying bones, recreating the anatomy, all the fun, good stuff of dissecting owl pellets. And then the third lesson is really taking the information that students have learned about a barn owl through supplemental readings that we provide, and then doing species comparisons between 2 other owl species and applying the knowledge that they've learned from the barn owl to those other species and the pellets that they may produce. So again, that's going to be the structure of tonight's webinar, and the curriculum is tied to the Next Generation Science Standards and the Common Core State Standards. If those are, especially for the NGSS standards, if you have to meet those, that's all covered here. The kit is designed for 3rd through 7th grade, so that's around the age group that I'll keep towards for this webinar too. Before we really dive in, obviously, some of you have dissected owl pellets before, others haven't, but have at least attended this webinar. So I want to open up the discussion to you guys just to figure out what brought you to this webinar. Why do you dissect owl pellets with kids, or why do you want to dissect owl pellets with kids? And a broader concept, why even teach kids about owls in the first place? So if you want to share your thoughts in the chat window, that will help give us some idea of what brought you all here. So one idea, Tammy, you thought it'd be a great educational program for homeschoolers. Yeah, that would actually be a really fun opportunity. It's hands-on illustration of the food chain. Kids are always interested in animals that eat other animals. Owls are one of the most engaging species to work with. Many people, yeah, Hillary, many people really can recognize an owl and relate to them. To teach about food webs, talk about predator-prey concepts, monitoring what owls are eating. A great starting point for just introducing dissection and the concept of dissection as well. Absolutely, especially once you get into older age groups when they need to start dissecting other animals or even plants or whatever. Owls are mysterious. Yeah, that really does help grab attention. And then Mary, that's a great point. Hoping to connect the human impacts on habitats as well. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in this webinar. So a lot of great reasons of why dissecting owl pellets are a wonderful educational tool, and owls in general. One, owls just really do captivate many audiences, young or old. For me, I'm thinking back, like the one thing that really first captivated my attention with owls was the old Tootsie Pop commercials, where you're licking the Tootsie Pop. How many licks does it take to get to the center of the Tootsie Pop? 1, 2, 3, and it was always the owl. And I'm thinking, wow, that owl has a great beak strength for it to crunch through that Tootsie Roll. But I loved owls ever since then. And many kids, though they may not show those old commercials, they do captivate audiences. And that captivation is a perfect launching point to teach topics like food webs, like human impact, or predator-prey interactions. So it's wonderful that many of you guys are on the same wavelength as I am, and that you also appreciate the commercial, Tammy. So looking at this owl here, this is a great horned owl, and one of the first things I think of when I see this great horned owl is how well it's adapted to its habitat. And this is another activity that I've done with kids where you can show them this habitat, or you can show them several different types of habitats and ask them the question of what habitat does this owl belong to if you're showing them several different ones, and having them assess characteristics of the owl to choose a habitat, or just providing us one and say, what characteristics does this owl possess to live in this habitat, to survive in this habitat. And we can talk about camouflage, the ear tufts, strong talons for prey, the large eyes for seen in dawn, dusk, at night. So there's a lot of different things we could talk about. One of the things with owls is adaptation. But we're going to jump over that adaptation and really focus on the concept of food webs. Again, that's our first lesson within the Owl Pellet Kit. Here are some of the learning objectives we have, which include, providing basic elements of a food chain, understanding the complexity of a food web, and really, especially for older audiences, going further with talking about trophic levels and the energy flow and how human impact could disrupt the food web and the trophic levels that are present in owl ecosystems. So hopefully we are all under the basic understanding of what a food chain is. The sun produces energy, producers convert that energy, and they create it into a consumable form that our consumers can then eat. Nice linear process of the energy progressing and ultimately having decomposers recycling that energy. A food web is just many food chains in a more complex manner. And if you recall from the video or this image here, you saw a lot of kids with some name tags around their necks and holding a bunch of different string. And that's our first activity that we have them do, is conducting a food web tangle. Each student is assigned a animal or character within this food web on the left. You see we have our barn owl present, our mascot and representative for this Owl Pellet Kit that we have. But you can notice that it's a very complex diagram. And we have kids replicate this complexity of a food web with the string. So, for example, one of the students would be assigned a sun. And the sun would then be connected to all the producers that are receiving direct energy from the sun. So the leaves, the seeds, the berries, and the nectar. So that sun would have 4 connections going out. Then each of those producers would be connected to a first level consumer that's going to be eating them. Again, that direct connection, a flow of energy, and so on and so forth. And we use this to help demonstrate, one, the complexity, the web that's being formed of a food web, but also it's providing a tactile option for kids. One of the scenarios we can provide them is, what would happen if the barn owl, for example, died off or was no longer present in the ecosystem? So the child who is the barn owl could drop all their strings and we could visually see which other species would be impacted. Some of our decomposers and some of our consumers that would be eaten by a barn owl. This can also be represented more in trophic levels. So here we have our pyramid of energy, our trophic levels. Our producers are at the bottom, and our primary consumers, the wildlife that is first directly consuming those producers, are first, then secondary and tertiary. With trophic levels, each one of these is a trophic level for those who aren't familiar. With these, what we can provide is giving scenarios for kids to then apply human impact. So we'll give you an example here. I'll share the example twice, and I want you to think about the impacts that the scenario would have on the trophic levels you see here. So there's a town, we'll call it Flower Town, for example, and Flower Town loves its flowers. And it really doesn't want to have its flowers be impacted by anything. It draws in a lot of tourists, brings in some income, so they really take pride in their flowers. Now, one of the things that they might do to prevent their flowers from being destroyed or harmed would be to spray an insecticide. And that insecticide will be sprayed all over the producers to prevent any damage to their flowers. How might the spraying of that insecticide impact the other trophic levels we have the primary consumers, secondary, and tertiary consumers. So in the chat window, share your thoughts. I'll repeat the scenario one more time. Flower Town loves its flowers and wants to prevent anything from happening to them. So they spray an insecticide over all of their flowers and plants to ensure their flowers don't become damaged. How might the spraying of that insecticide on the flowers impact the consumers of these trophic levels? And again, you can share your thoughts in the chat window. Okay, so we're talking, some of the responses are coming in. The insecticide will affect our insect populations. Populations will decrease. It could collapse the food web potentially. The poisoning of the insects and animals who consume the flowers and nectars, which would then ultimately poison secondary and tertiary consumers. Bioaccumulation, reduction of population numbers. Yeah, there's a lot of different things that can take place here. First and foremost, it really depends on the type of insecticide, I would say. Is it killing off all insect populations? Or is it really just reducing those populations? But a really great example that somebody brought up was DDT and how that accumulated and infected our tertiary or high predators with the eagle or the osprey's eggs, the raptor eggs, basically. So the very first thing that we can all agree on is there is going to be an impact on the trophic levels above the producers, our primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers in this diagram here. We can lose insect populations, such as the caterpillar, the butterfly, the swallowtail here, the grasshopper. These are all populations that are directly feeding off of our producers. I personally am unaware of how insecticides would impact an American goldfinch. For those who aren't aware, American goldfinches are strict vegetarians, and so they are only going to be eating the seeds and the berries of producers. They're not going to eat any other insects. So how an insecticide might affect a goldfinch is unsure, but other animals will be eating said goldfinch, and that's where that bioaccumulation comes into play. And it will progress up through all the consumers. Yeah, and there are several different scenarios we have applied within the kit itself. Another one could be removing, for example, a primary consumer instead. What happens if we removed a mouse population, or what happens if we remove a snake population, and so forth, and how impacting one of these middle trophic levels could alter populations in different ways. So this is where we're trying to really pull out the application of the concept. We really want kids to apply what they've learned within the food web to real life concepts, that human impact that we've talked about. So that's really the focus on the lesson one is what is the concept of food web, the human impact, and also keeping in mind that our barn owl here is embedded within that ecosystem. And then it's always fun to dig into the actual owl pellets itself, which is all about lesson two. We talk about and explain how owl pellets are formed. We develop, especially for younger age groups, this is very vital for them to start to develop their observational skills and accurately recording those observations. So taking measurements of the pellet, creating a 2-scale diagram of the pellet from the outside, as well as making observations and reconstructing the skeleton once they've dug into their owl pellet itself. A quick note, For those of you who may be interested in learning about the pellets that we source wild barn owl pellets. So these are, people regularly go out, these are sourced from California, I believe. They go out, barn owls are notorious for roosting or perching in the same location, which allows the collectors of pellets to regularly go back to the same spot and collect these pellets in the wild. Because of that, we really have no idea what kids are going to find in the pellets. We have found anything, a lot of vole skulls, shrews, mice. We had a rat once, and we had bird evidence once. We've yet to find an insect exoskeleton yet, but it's always possible too. So that's the nice thing, real quick, it just, we can't guarantee what you're gonna find in owl pellet, but it's usually some really good stuff. Now, the first thing we want to figure out or help kids understand is, what is an owl pellet? How are pellets formed? And one of the participants from Tuesday's webinar made a really great comparison between a cat fur ball and an owl pellet, because there's a common misconception what owl pellets are. They are not poop. They're coming out of the other end, very much like a cat fur ball. And for those who haven't seen it before, there's just a quick YouTube video I want to share with you guys. So you can see what the regurgitation process actually looks like. This is a barred owl that will be regurgitating a pellet. For those who don't know, they're indigestible parts. Beautiful barred owl there. And out it pops. Fairly simple. Simple, straightforward. That's what it's like when an owl regurgitates a pellet. Now again, these pellets, the reason why owls regurgitate pellets is because there are parts of their prey that they cannot digest. If I recall, the acidity level of an owl's stomach is rather low, which is why they can't digest much of the hard parts of their prey. So these parts include the bones, the fur, the teeth. In insects, for some of the owls, they can't even digest the exoskeletons of insects. So what the owl will do, they'll consume the prey whole, they will digest what they can, and then compress into a pellet what they can't. And that's where they regurgitate the pellet. Now, to help learn about this for kids, I know somebody mentioned in the chat window, they show the process of the owls regurgitating pellets like what I showed you. We also provide educational readings for the kids, a quick way to help meet the, to help provide ELA connections through the Common Core State Standards. We give the information and facts about what can and can't be digested and how owls create the pellet and regurgitate the pellets. And then it's the fun part of digging into it. So after making some observations on the outside, then kids are able to really dive into cracking open their pellet and trying to discover what they will find. You'll see in the images here, the kids aren't wearing gloves. That's a common question we receive. Is it sanitary? Excuse me. Whether dissecting owl pellets is sanitary or not, kids do not have to wear protection. We just don't encourage them to eat it or to stick their fingers in the mouth until they've actually washed off everything. That's not a good thing to do for them to eat the pellets, but they don't need to wear gloves when they're doing this. So during the process of the actual owl pellet dissection, as you may have seen in the video, there's a lot of excitement when kids first find a skull or a bone or a wing or whatever they may find in their pellet. And it's great not just to find all these bones, but to actually be able to identify what those bones are and what animal they belonged to. And that's where having a skull and a pellet really comes into play. Again, the pellets that we at least provide are wild caught. There's no guarantee that you're going to have a skull and a pellet, but majority of them do, and majority of them actually have multiple skulls within the pellet. And that skull is what will allow you to easily identify what prey the owl ate. So I want to take you guys through a quick test. The best way to identify a skull is using a dichotomous key. So we have the image here on the left, and we're going to try and identify what that skull is. For those who aren't familiar with a dichotomous key, it's very simple. You have two statements, and you choose which statement is accurate for what you're trying to identify. So our skull on the left, our two statements are 1A, skull does not have teeth or holes for teeth, or 1B, the skull has teeth. We have these supporting diagrams here for those who aren't familiar with skulls, but you can look at this and we can see that we have cheek teeth here and incisors here. So there's definitely teeth present in our skull. So 1B is correct, and it says go to 2. So our 2 statement. If by chance this skull didn't have any teeth at all, and that includes, sometimes the incisors are missing or sometimes some cheek teeth are missing, but you could still see that teeth were supposed to be present. That's why it says holes for teeth in 1A. If there were no teeth or holes for teeth, this would have been a bird skull, but there are, so we're going to go to 2. 2A, skull does not have a diastema or a gap between the front and cheek teeth. Diastema, again, we can refer to our diagram. It's labeled right here. Here's our cheek teeth. Here's our incisors. This is the gap. That's our diastema. So 2A, the skull does not have a diastema. That doesn't seem accurate. But 2B, the skull does have a diastema. We're looking at our skull here. There's our diastema, the gap. It says go to 4. So 4A, cheek teeth are angled or cheek teeth are lobed. Here are our cheek teeth diagram here. Lobed is nice and smooth along the side. Angled is very jagged and rough, and you can see that from this picture too. These are very jagged. These are angled teeth. And that has us identifying the skull as a vole. Vole is one of the most common prey that we'll find within our barn owl pellets. They just seem to love the vole. But if they did have lobed teeth, we can go on to potentially having a mouse or a rat. But this is in fact a vole skull, so that helps us identify right away what this owl was eating. It also gives us a better idea of what other types of bones we might have. So we do provide a pellet content chart where we have several common prey, bird, mice, shrews, voles, rats, and the different bones and body parts they might find. So ribs, scapula, pelvis, and what those look like for each of the different prey. Knowing that we have a vole skull, we would expect there could be other prey in there, types of prey, but we now have a narrow idea that, okay, some of the bones that we're finding are going to be under that vole category. As the kids start to identify the bones, they can start to then reconstruct a skeleton. We do provide this image here as a full sheet for kids where they can reconstruct a skeleton of a rodent. This is a generalized rodent skeleton, so you can apply the vole, the shrew, the mouse, the rat to this image, and then glue down the bones and have a complete or nearly complete skeleton. I would be impressed if in an owl pellet they could find every single vertebrae in tow, but for the most part they can get a general idea with the pelvis and the tibia and fibia and so forth. So that's where we're bringing in a lot of the anatomy, and here's what it would look like for some of the kids. This was one that a child did at our event, reconstructing a skeleton, but they had 3 other skulls in addition to the one present here that they found in their pellet. So they had 4 prey items in 1 pellet, which was quite impressive. And after kids have then gone through the process of dissecting their pellets and identifying what they found, this brings them into a really big content heavy lesson around predicting prey. And this is the compare and contrast option between 3 different owl species. So up to this point, the kids have learned and dissected barn owl pellets. However, we then introduced 2 new species of owls, the great horned owl and the eastern screech owl, where kids can then compare what types of prey they might find within the 3 different owl species, what size of pellets may be produced from those 3 species, comparing habitats, as well as quantity of prey too. For example, one of the things kids can do is the previous diagram here where the student had 4 skulls within the owl pellet that they found. They can actually calculate how many prey they anticipate the barn owl that they dissected the pellet from consumes on a daily, weekly, yearly basis. So bringing in a lot of that math, then also apply some of that to what would a great horned owl consume on a daily, weekly, yearly basis, and so forth. Now, with these 3 birds, we're not quite sure how familiar you may be with them, so we've decided we're going to give you a little owl test. Instead of having you guys read those 3 fact sheets and try and do some of the predictions, we want to just give you a quick poll and test your knowledge of the eastern screech owl, the barn owl, and the great horned owl. And just to give you a little hint, we provided the general size of the bird at the bottom, both in inches and centimeters. So you'll see that our eastern screech owl is the smallest, followed by the barn owl in the middle, and the great horned owl is the largest of the 3 owls. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a poll for you guys. It should pop up right in your front of your screen. And there are a total of 8 statements. Read each statement and choose which owl you think would be associated with that statement. Okay, so we'll give you about 2 minutes just to complete everything. Once you've done with your statements, make sure you hit submit. If you want, you're welcome to drag your statement around over your chat box or something like that so you can continue looking at your gorgeous image of these owls we have here. Oh, I love that barn owl image.
It's so cute.
So cute. But again, once you've completed all 8 statements, make sure you hit submit. We have 37 people on this webinar right now, so I'll know that once we get to around 30 people or so, I will end the poll. And our first one has already been submitted. Speed Demon. Submitted Eastern Screech Owl for every single one, I'm sure. One thing, Kelly just gave me an update in the chat window, a quick PSA. The owl pellets are sterilized. That's why you do not need to wear gloves. But again, please don't eat the owl pellets. But yes, they are sterilized, so you don't have to worry about that.
They're not part of the recommended daily diet, though.
Yeah, they may meet your fiber needs, but we're about 50% complete. As you've finished all 8 statements, make sure you hit the submit button. These are anonymous. It's okay. I'm not going to point out that a random name. Lindsay.
Yourself.
Myself. You got every single run wrong. Horrible. No, these, it's completely anonymous. So even if you don't know, just select an answer and hit submit. Huh. Can't see the poll. Minimize the window. If you go to the top part of it, it will ask you if you want to just minimize out of the PowerPoint, and the poll should be behind that.
Yeah, if you're in full screen, sometimes it does pop up behind. So you might have to exit full screen to find it.
Yes, that's what it's called, exit full screen. If you did find it when you couldn't, let us know that you did. We are going to go over each statement together. I am going to give you guys another 30 seconds, and then we'll go over everything. Okay, get your final answers in, and we will commence. 3, 2, 1. Polling is ending. I'm going to share the results with you guys. So theoretically, the results should have popped back up on your screen after I ended the poll. The first statement, I'm a powerful predator that can catch large prey. My talons are so big, you better keep your cat indoors. Fortunately, we provided the size for you guys, whether you knew this or not. Everybody is correct. This is a great horned owl. Not only should you keep your cat indoors so that they don't get eaten by great horned owls, but it's generally good practice to keep cats indoors. They are actually a nuisance, or more than a nuisance, to bird populations. So if you do have an outdoor cat, consider bringing them indoors, especially during the nesting season when birds are most susceptible, and feeding season. But also, you never know. Great horned owl could come down and swoop and get them. Number 2, I'm the most widely distributed species of owl. I live on every continent except Antarctica. Majority of people got this right. This is a barn owl. One of the things Kelly and I love to do is sometimes go off script and pull up eBird. We did that the other night to test if we could figure out where all the other species were. So a barn owl is seen on every single continent except Antarctica. An eastern screech owl, however, is only found within North America. And a great horned owl is, what do we see? North America and South America. Yep, so barn owl by far 6 of the 7, eastern screech owl 1 consonant, great horned owl only 2 consonants. Number 3, crows gather from near and far to yell at me for hours. The crows have a good reason for this. I'm their most dangerous predator. This is the great horned owl. They love crows. We actually have one of the world's leading crow experts here at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology in our education department, Kevin McGowan. If you've taken any of our online courses or webinars, there's a good chance Kevin wrote them. And he regularly monitors the crow population around the Ithaca area now, including going up into their nests, becoming familiar with the families that we have here, because crows are family-oriented birds. And he has informed us that he will know if a great horned owl has attacked any of his nests, because he'll pull up to it and he'll find crow heads scattered on the ground. Great horned owls seem to decapitate the crows. They won't eat the head. They will just take the body. And did he say at any point it was for pleasure at all, or just, I couldn't remember.
I think it's mostly just a prey.
Just a prey
Yeah.
thing. Okay. I couldn't remember if there was a form of insidious nature there or something. But yes, so great horned owls will decapitate crows. They are a great predator for them. And oftentimes if you see a group of crows or ravens or really any form of birds that are going to display a mobbing behavior, they look like they're going to attack something, there's a good chance there's a predator there, which can include an owl. So always investigate those types of situations of mobbing. Statement 4, even though I eat European starling, a starling might take over my nest and lay its own eggs in it. This is an eastern screech owl. They may be small and mighty enough to European starlings, but not mighty enough to keep them out of their nests, I guess. Yes, European starlings may in fact take over a eastern screech owl nest. Statement 5, I strictly hunt at night compared to my fellow owls who also hunt at dusk, dawn, and sometimes even during the day. A lot of mixed reviews on this. It was basically a tie between eastern screech owl and barn owl with some good representation of great horned owl. This is in fact a barn owl. The barn owls have it. So these guys are amazing hunters, and we'll actually talk about this in statement 7 too, but they do only hunt at night, not during dusk or dawn. Statement 6, I come in 2 color morphs, gray and red. This is the eastern screech owl. Well done. I myself have only seen a gray morph, and I'm very disappointed I haven't seen a red one. Kelly, you've only seen a red morph?
I've only seen red morphs, multiple, but red morphs.
We need to go out, find eastern screech owls, and one of us will get a new morph. So yes, these do have 2 color morphs. I believe the more common color morph is the gray, but it really depends on the region of the United States that you're in. Statement 7, my ability to locate prey by sound alone is the best of any animal that has been tested. Again, it was a near tie between barn owl and great horned owl. This is in fact the barn owl. And this is one of the reasons why barn owls are only hunting at night, or only need to hunt at night and not dusk and dawn or even during the day. Barn owls have an incredible sense of sound. If you look at the shape of the barn owl's head, it has a gorgeous heart-shaped face, and that's a facial disc that's just funneling the sound in directly to the ears of the barn owl. It has that amazing sense of sound alone allows them to really be successful predators at night. Our final statement, the most important question of the night. I am the coolest owl of them all. Seems like we have some great horned owl fans out here. They won with 12 votes compared to eastern screech owl with 6 and barn owl with 5. I don't think Kelly and I can choose. Depends on the night and our mood. I'm feeling the barn owl right now, but yes. But that was a nice little quiz that we provide. All of these facts that we tested you guys on today, besides which owl is the coolest, are found within our educational sheets that you can see here, these fact sheets about each owl. Again, we're bringing in some of the ELA components for kids. They're reading some of these fact sheets, the habitat, the locations, the nesting sites, behaviors, food sources, etc., that allows them to do a Venn diagram, a compare and contrast, and apply the knowledge that they've learned from owl pellets to these 3 different owl species. So that's basically a summary of kits. If you are interested in teaching more about owls to kids, I know there's some homeschool groups, or there's some younger audiences elementary teachers who may want to bring in some reading components. This is a marvelous book, White Owl, Barn Owl, that again focuses on the barn owl and brings on some really great nesting components. So, for example, they nest in old buildings and hollow trees. They revisit their favorite perches. They swallow their prey whole, producing pellets. Their eyes are designed to allow them to see in very low light, and that heart-shaped facial disc funnels the sound to their ears. So there's a lot of great information that's available out there. This is a great reading source too. One final piece of information that I want to share with you guys is many people do talk about building nest boxes, and you can build nest boxes for owls or platforms too. And one of the best resources is our citizen science project called Nest Watch. I'm going to share my screen here with you guys. So within your browser, if you want to go to nestwatch.org, and Callie will share the URL for this in the chat window as well, but nestwatch.org is the URL for our citizen science project Nest Watch. If you find any nests, if you put up nest boxes and you want to monitor nesting birds and share that information to us, we're more than welcome to do that through this project. But they also have the Learn tab here to learn more about nesting cycles, about parasitic birds like brown-headed cowbirds, etc. Well, they have this great interactive called Right Bird, Right House, and that's what I'm going to show you guys. So with this interactive, all you need to do is just select the region you live in. So for Callie and I, we're in the Northeast, and a primary habitat. So at our house, we have forest in the background. And based on where you live in your primary habitat that you want to put your nest box in, it will come up with a whole list of information and of nesting birds that would live in your area that would use a nest box or nest platform, how easy it is to make, whether it's kid-friendly or not, and whether that species is in nesting decline in your area. So for the American robin, it actually is in decline within that Northeast region for us. And you can look at some of these and really figure out what's going to happen. We have an eastern screech owl here. This is a species in decline for our region. If I want, I can click on the screech owl. One thing it will ask you, if you haven't downloaded this before, is just to put in your email address. That allows us at Cornell to best track how many people are utilizing our resources. As a nonprofit, those numbers are very important to us. So you can download the construction plan, and it will show you, the dimensions, the piece of information, where everything goes together to build the nest box. You'll also see that some of the nest boxes, like this one for the screech owl, can be used for other animals too, like the American kestrel, the saw-whet, boreal, and bufflehead. We go back though to our original page. You can scroll down and it will show you where is the nesting range of this bird? What are the habitats that it will live in? What can you attach your nest box to? And the no nesting period is actually very important. If Kelly and I wanted to support some eastern screech owls in our backyard, we better start building our nest box soon and have it hung before the main nesting period, which can start as early as mid-February, but primarily gets underway into early March. So we'd want to have our nest box hung probably around the early February time period. It will then tell us information of, how high should the nest box be? If we're going to hang up multiple eastern screech owl boxes, how far away should they be from each other? Certain nest boxes need to face a specific direction, and so forth, plus helpful tips of what to do. So this is just a great tool that if you are interested in specifically supporting owls or nesting in any of your areas, you can do that. So now decide I'm in the southwest region in the desert, and a barn owl came up. So anyways, I just wanted to share that helpful resource for you guys through the Nest Watch program if you are interested in owl nest boxes. And again, if you do put up a nest box or even find any form of nest at all, man-made or bird-made, you're welcome to share. We really want you to share your nest observations through our citizen science project. One final image. How cute is that? We have a student publication magazine called Birdsleuth Investigator. We regularly publish student artwork and investigations in this magazine, and this was 2016's cover photo. So with that, Kelly and I will be happy to take any questions that you have. I'm sure there's been a couple questions we may have missed in the chat window or Q&A box. Before I take the questions real quick, I just wanted to do a quick announcement. Right now, we are actually having a 50% sale on our Owl Pellet replenishment kit. The replenishment kit is essentially all the consumables of our Owl Pellet Kit. So what it is 15 or 16, I can't remember the exact number, owl pellets, the trays to dissect the owl pellets in, the tweezers, the glue, the string to do the food web tangle. It's all the consumables. And that right now is 50% off. But we have an even better one where you can get the entire Owl Pellet curriculum, which is the lessons and the pellets and all consumables. And if you pay to get the entire thing, you actually can get a microscope, a compound microscope for free. It's a $50 compound microscope. One of our partners, Celestron, is giving away of those. We only have 2 microscopes left, so the first 2 people that do purchase the Owl Pellet curriculum will get the microscope. As soon as those 2 microscopes are gone, you can no longer purchase the curriculum, so it will tell you online. Kelly's going to share the link to those in the chat window of where you can find both the replenishment kit on 50% off, which is just the consumables, or where you can purchase the Owl Pellet Kit, which has all the lessons and consumables, and you can get the free microscope too, which if you haven't seen an owl pellet under a microscope, it's super cool. So I just wanted to throw those 2 pieces of information out there. Okay, I'm going to start looking through the chat window. Kelly, have I missed any questions yet?
So someone was actually asking, and this was maybe an interesting one for everyone, about what other birds make pellets. I mean, it's a surprising variety of birds. So other raptors make pellets, hawks, eagles, falcons, some like water birds, some gulls, herons, grebes, and some perching birds like kingfishers and crows and jays. Apparently American dippers do too, so a number of birds do. I don't think that any are quite as reliable or show as much site fidelity as owls, which is probably why it's a lot easier to find owl pellets. But yeah, lots of birds do.
Excellent. I didn't know about grebes.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a pair of great horned owls in our neighborhood. They don't seem to roost together, but call to each other from a distance. What behavior are they displaying?
It's a great question. That could be a couple of things. So you could have 2 territories near each other, or it could be a mated pair. Owls tend to mate earlier in the season than other birds, so they would probably be like establishing territories pretty soonish. And then it's infrequent that they would necessarily roost together.
Yeah, so I'm thinking...
Unless there's one on a nest, you know?
Yeah, I'm thinking roost together. Like when we had our mating great horned owl pair down at Stewart Park, Kelly.
Yes.
We had the family where they had 2 owlets and the 2 parents.
Yes.
And even when we saw them and when they were regularly seen by people, the owl adults were not actually together.
Yeah.
And sometimes not even with the owlets either, which I love that name.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's pretty common for them not to roost kind of cuddled up together.
And I guess when you hear them call back and forth, it really is going to depend on time of year.
Yeah, and so like mates will talk to each other.
Yep.
Yeah.
Catherine, so those who have already purchased the kit with the microscopes, so you probably purchased them in December, those microscopes are being shipped directly from Celestron. We have not gotten a confirmation from Celestron of when they're actually being shipped or not. We keep pestering them. They were a little delayed with the holiday season. So I'll send them another email tomorrow with asking for an update about what's happening with those. Aaron.
Yeah, so I am trying to get the copies of the Bird Sleuth Investigator 2018 sent out to the folks who were published in it. For you, those of you who don't know, currently our magazine the year is for the year that the schoolwork was produced in. So 2018 is the most current version because it was work produced in 2018 by students. But yeah, so Aaron, you actually won't need to purchase them. I will be sending you copies. I was going to send a dozen, but if you think you want more than that, let me know. And hopefully I'll get them out in the mail tomorrow, barring the unforeseen with the weather.
Okay, next question. How do you sterilize pellets? Oh, dear me.
You bake them.
You bake them, but at what temperature for how long? That I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that. My guess is go to Google or go to a nature center that has owls. I really don't know the answer to that. I'm so sorry. I see students for 45 minutes. What's the estimated time for dissection? So the way we structured lesson 2 and the resource, or one quick question, somebody asked the grade range. The grade range is 3rd through 7th to 8th. We have provided extension high school questions too, but that's the grade range we structured with the standard alignment. Now, as far as the sessions go for the dissection, we estimate you'll probably want 2 to 3 45-minute sessions for the dissection. And what the size of the kit is you get, I think it's 16 pellets. It says on the website, but I believe it's 16 pellets. The size of the pellets are the extra large ones. And you'll see within the kit, they come with a clamshell, like the little plastic clamshell you sometimes get food in. So they're designed that as kids are dissecting the pellet, they dissect them in the clamshell. When your 45-minute session is done, you close the clamshell up. Everything stays within that area so they can go back to their dissection for the next session. We've had a 3rd grade teacher help us design this. She made it very practical for teachers who see kids in multiple sessions. Okay, James, this is a big one. What's your opinion on playing recorded owl sounds? Is it okay outside of mating season? That really is going to depend on who you ask. I will be honest, it's done occasionally by Kelly or myself outside of the mating season. And usually that only happens if we're desperate to see a certain species.
Yeah, I mean, they do. I mean, that's typical protocol for owl surveys is using callbacks. And some folks will use callbacks during the mating season, though I think that opinion on that is changing a little bit to be that it's more disruptive to do it for any bird during that time, so people try to avoid it.
Dylan's asking a question, is the skull dichotomous key part of the kit or could you get it separately? It is part of the kit. Everything that we have showed you is part of the kit. All the images besides, images of the actual kids, all the words are failing me.
I'm sorry, I'm reading another comment.
All the actual supplemental images like the trophic levels and that kind of stuff are all part of the kit. We do not sell any of those separately. They are copyrighted, unfortunately. And we've had special artists here who developed those. Venn diagram suggestions. Michael, can you provide a little more elaboration on Venn diagram suggestions for us? Sherry, everybody who was published within Bird Sleuth Investigator will get copies. Kelly has the full spreadsheet of everybody who submitted stuff and who was published. You can also purchase a copy of Bird Sleuth Investigator or download Bird Sleuth Investigator for free on our website. We'll have Kelly put those links in the chat window right now.
Well, in like 30 seconds.
In like 30 seconds, okay. And I thank you so much for joining us. I realize we're after 9 o'clock. I want to just give you a quick heads up. Feel free to stay in touch with us. Our contact information is on the slide right now, and I'll type our email in the chat window too, as well as our URL. If you would like a letter of completion for attending this webinar, send us an email. It's k12lab@cornell.edu. That's now in the chat window. And our new URL, if you haven't noticed it yet, is birds.cornell.edu/K12. Oh, there's a slash missing on there. And that has all of our information as well. Okay, Michael. So what we're doing with the Venn diagram that we had that's embedded within the curriculum is a compare and contrast between the 3 different owl species, the great horned owl, the eastern screech owl, and the barn owl. And they're comparing size, food preferences, habitat, nesting, and so forth. So that's what that Venn diagram is all about within the curriculum. Thank you guys so much. We'll we fortunately just live down the street, so we shouldn't be too bad with the snow. We'll just see what happens come tomorrow.
What if one of us goes off the road? Hopefully the other will stay on.
I'll let you drive in front of me because I have all-wheel drive, and if I need to, I'll pull you out of the ditch.
Okay.